Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'd like to thank Nuffield for the opportunity to research my topic, and also to thank my sponsor, the John Oldacre Foundation. I am Fred Langdale, a viticulturalist. I've worked in the industry for 22 years. I've approached Nuffield wanting to explore methods of frost protection and how post-frost event care and cool climate viticulture could mitigate any damage experienced. As I'm sure you're aware, wine production in the UK is a relatively young enterprise, and we lack much of the infrastructure in place in more established wine-growing regions. Climate change means our industry is facing more challenging growing seasons, with frost posing a real risk to maintaining successful businesses. It seemed a sensible option to quiz those with more experience in combating this. You will have witnessed countless articles in the mainstream media about how climate change is affecting our growing seasons. You'll remember the beast from the east in 2017, a frozen wind from Siberia that swept across England and Northern Europe. More commonly, we experience radiation frosts in spring, which are localized in frost pockets. Now, frost is not a new phenomenon in farming. I'm not going to start telling you all the differences of frost or why they occur. I could go straight to the end of this presentation and say that the best frost protection in viticulture is not to plant a vineyard in a frost pocket in the first place. However, my aim with my Nuffield journey was to find an economical, environmentally friendly and sustainable approach to frost protection. There are tracts of land that have qualities for a fantastic vineyard but are currently unavailable to viticulture due to frost. To compound our problem, the viticulturists in the UK are finding that spring can come early. The vines come out of winter dormancy earlier in April, leaving new shoots vulnerable to these later frosts in May. In the last 7 years, I have seen 2 years without spring frost events. The impact of a frost event can be very detrimental to the survival of a business. A frost event uses up the vine's carbohydrate stores, which affects the efficiency of the vineyard for years after the initial frost. Here is some data to illustrate the growth of UK viticulture based on information provided by WineGB. 1.9 million bottles of wine was produced in year 2000, which has increased to 12.2 million in 2022, an increase of 542%. Around 4,600 hectares is now planted to wine vines in the UK and is expected to grow to up to 9,100 hectares in the next 10 years. There is an increasing demand for land now the UK is recognised as a quality grape growing area. You can see on the right that apart from in 2018 and 2022, I've had to battle frost each year into May. This, coupled with warmer springs encouraging earlier bud bursts, significantly impacts the business. On my Nuffield travels in early 2020, I visited New Zealand and Tasmania. I want to understand the different scenarios of frost events, how other viticulturists combat them, and how successful their measures are. My plan was to visit larger, cool climate wine-producing countries that I knew combat frost, and then to visit smaller regions where frost is an issue, hopefully finding out all the different systems available. Ben McLachlan showed me his vineyards with frost fans in place in Marlborough, New Zealand. These are static 60-foot fans which combine the frozen air on the ground with the warmer inversion layer above. These fans have in recent years become available worldwide. Bruce Collar in Canterbury, New Zealand, had invented his own frost fighting machine, the Heat Ranger, which is in the top right there. A huge hairdryer blowing hot air over soft fruits to combat advection frost, claimed to protect up to 10 hectares. Both these options come at high initial costs. A viticulturist in Canterbury, New Zealand, who suffers from advection frost, shared his solution, which was to light diesel smudge pots, so releasing high heat and lots of smoke. He surrounds a static frost fan with up to 20 of these smudge pots. The smoke and heat blows over his vines and partially protects the vines closest to the fan. I have experimented with 10-litre vegetable fat candles. These do work, but are labour-intensive at a time that is hard to get labour, typically between 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. I'm concerned about their environmental impact, and they are unaffordable at the scale that I need. Another method I investigated was the use of sprinklers. The technique works via the latent heat of fusion. When the liquid becomes a solid, a small amount of heat is released. 1 gram of water freezing produces 80 calories. This is what provides the protection. And for it to work, the water needs to keep being applied so that there is a water-ice interface, and the continued freezing of the water releases the heat. If the water application stops, then things are worse than without the ice. As ice vaporizes, heat is lost. It becomes a refrigeration system. So under windy conditions, a higher rate of water application is needed. Sprinkler systems need a lot of water, around 1.4 million litres per hectare for one frost event. There are still further methods available for protection against frost. I had arranged to visit Almaty in Kazakhstan to witness how producers bury vines under the soil to protect against the freezing Russian winds during the winter. Unfortunately, COVID did cut my travels short, so when I got home, I started experimenting on the vineyard I manage in Hampshire. Certain pruning systems are favourable to avoid frost damage. Vertically spur pruned vines seem to fare better after frost events due to a larger carbohydrate store in the trunks of the vines. Unfortunately, some varieties don't yield as well with this pruning system. Leaving a reserve cane in the single and double guillot pruning systems, which is then left untrained so it's further away from the ground and often escapes damage. Not a very complicated solution. But this reserve cane then needs to be cut out and later dated, so increased labour costs. I racked my brain on how to design an enormous cover that I could drive tractors under that could be put up and taken down after frost risks had passed. I virtually met a fruit grower in Scotland who suffered advection and radiation frost, who came up with this idea, but I'm still waiting for a brainwave of how to actually do it. Unfortunately, permanent covers or polytunnels are not allowed to be able to grow a quality English wine under protection designation of origins laws. Soil management. Traditional teaching argues that to combat radiation frost in vineyards, you must have compacted soil. Ideally, you would have no cover crops. This helps to retain the heat in the soil, which is released overnight. Bare soil also allows the frost to flow easily off the vineyard site to a lower frost pocket. You can see that I had followed the textbooks on the right-hand side earlier on in my career. However, I met Graham Roberts, a biodynamic viticulturist in Baghdad Hills in Tasmania. He was passionate about the importance of aerated soil with a high organic matter percentage for vines to be healthy and more productive throughout the growing season. This meeting confirmed my regenerative soil management approach that had slowly been developing over the years. I don't use herbicides. This now allows mycorrhizal activity to thrive. I grow green manures and introduce compost to increase organic matter percentages. These measures allow vines to produce a higher starch level. As a result, these vines have a higher threshold to lower temperatures. I graze the vineyard with sheep during the winter, which keeps the grass short, allowing the frost to flow off the vineyard. I also get a very available source of nitrogen through that manure. Despite our very best efforts, sometimes the weather wins out and our vines are damaged by frost. I discovered that common practice across all my interviewees was to do a preemptive nutritional foliar spray when they expected cold weather, seaweed being a good example. Immediately after frost, they would redo this spray with the idea that the cell walls and the young shoots would be strengthened by the nutrition. If, however, it became clear that the young shoots hadn't survived, an aggressive pruning is enacted to encourage strong shoots that can be relied on for the next year's pruning architecture. Since completing my Nuffield studies, I have purchased a tow and blow fan, much like the fans I saw in New Zealand, but smaller to abide to UK laws. This fan is set to start automatically at 1 degree centigrade. The fan produces an 80-mile-an-hour wind, which mixes the cold air with the warmer inversion layer. The fan can cover between 4 to 6 hectares, depending on the severity of the frost. I now have the advantage to be able to start the fan multiple times without the risk of wasting funds if the temperature doesn't drop to the temperature I expected. So far, the fan has worked with great success. No plot of land is the same. No one frost defence system will work for every site. But I believe we have the opportunity in the UK to find terroir that is currently unavailable due to frost. I hope my discoveries will allow growers to find a new flavour, maybe a new style, that is uniquely from the UK. I like to imagine driving down Cheddar Gorge or over the Chilterns, or close to home, the Meon Valley, and seeing grapevines covering the hillsides, much like our neighbouring established regions. Hopefully, with some of this information I have gained, this will become a reality. Thank you very much for listening.